So the next chapter is the governance chapter, and this is the chapter that deals with the right of self-government on your treaty settlement lands and over your own citizens. This is a very lengthy chapter and quite a complicated chapter. However, there are a couple of important pieces. First, the treaty makes it absolutely clear that your nations have the right to self-government, and that right will be protected in the treaty. For some time, the provincial government was saying that they wanted to see self-government protected outside of the treaty so that if they changed their views down the road, they could draw it back or unilaterally change it. But it became very clear that there was going to be no agreement in the treaty if they insisted on this. And so there is now a clear guarantee that self-government will be protected in the treaty. Each First Nation is going to have a government. It's going to have public institutions if it chooses to set them up, and that it will act collectively through its government. Additionally, each First Nation is going to have a constitution. That constitution is going to be developed on a nation-by-nation basis between AIP and final, and will have to be approved in a referendum by the community. There's a list of matters that have to be dealt with in your constitution, but some of the most important ones are that the Constitution has to be a democratic constitution. It has to provide for regular elections. It has to provide for accountability of your government to your citizens. There has to be provisions for fiscal transparency with the information being made available to your community, and various other provisions related to how your government works. Additionally, there will also have to be a citizenship code which will spell out who you entitle to be a citizen in your community. One of the basic rules is that everybody who's eligible under the eligibility chapter has to have the right to become a citizen if they choose to, but you may choose to make your citizenship larger and include more people for various reasons if you want to. This will be something that you will decide yourself and will form at least part of your Constitution, and may also be reflected in the citizenship code outside of your Constitution. This will be a very important piece of work between agreement in principle and final agreement. For some of the nations, some of that work has already been done as a part of developing land code, but there is a lot more work that will have to be done even for those nations. The next part of the governance chapter deals with essentially the government acting fairly in the way that it affects people. So it's expected that after agreement principle, after final agreement, rather, there will be people who are citizens living on your treaty settlement land. There will be people who are not citizens living on your treaty settlement land. And your government may make decisions that could affect them. So there are basic rules built into the governance chapter to ensure fairness for the people living on your land. Notice will have to be given of any decisions that are made. People will have to have a chance to let the government know how those decisions may affect them, and the government has to take that into account. Additionally, if the government sets up public institutions, so like a school board, for example, which has powers that could affect non-citizens have the right, if they're living on treaty settlement land, to select by election or some other method at least one person to sit on that public institution. However, there is no right on the part of non-citizens to appoint somebody to your government or to elect somebody from your government or to vote for your government. Your government will be elected solely by your citizens. Now, after this, there's a section that deals with protections for your government officials, ensure that they are not open to unfair or unjust attacks for carrying out their government duties. And this is actually an improvement on the situation now, where councillors and chiefs are given no real protections in the way that even mayors or members of the provincial legislature are given. After those sections, there is a long list of governance powers that are laid out for the First Nations governments. I won't try to list them all in this discussion, but they include matters such as the power to set laws involving how marriages will be carried out, how adoptions will be carried out. There are various laws involving child and family welfare services. There's laws involving the management of structures on your land. There's a long list of laws that are designed to essentially ensure that your First Nation is able to make laws that protect your lands, enhance economic development, and also serve your people. These laws are written in a way that spell out, first of all, what the scope of the lawmaking power is, so what the government can do, but it also lays out what happens in the case that there's a conflict between your law and a federal or provincial law. In some cases, your law is the law that comes out on top in the case of a conflict. In some cases, it's federal or provincial law. Fundamentally, though, for matters that relate to your lands or to your people, it is your laws that usually predominate. There are also provisions in the final agreement that deal with, in the governance chapter of the final agreement, that deal with matters such as the right to challenge new laws, to challenge decisions that are made. There are rights to have decisions reviewed so that the government can be held to account either within your own tribunals or in court. There are also provisions that deal with the ability to enforce your laws in the courts, which involves making agreements between your government and the other governments so that it's clear who can prosecute those people and who can and who's responsible for the costs associated with that. It's important to understand that the governance chapter provides the power to make laws, but does not require any government to make laws. One thing that's a very practical reality for each of your First Nations is that you're relatively small and that it will take time to develop your economic base. It'll also take time to ensure that your systems of government are working properly. So just because there are lawmaking powers, it shouldn't be expected that your First Nation will exercise those lawmaking powers right away. Instead, it is likely that there will be periods of time where important laws will be passed first. The government will take time to make sure that the systems are up and running. And then as new laws are necessary, say, for example, to protect culture or to provide for education on treaty settlement land, those laws will be introduced.